up later. Each of those local land service organisations will have 7 directors. There'll be 4 of them appointed by the Minister, including the Chair, and 3 will be elected by LHPA ratepayers. So 3 elected directors, and there's going to be a complicated system about that relates how much you pay in rates to how many votes you get when it comes to director elections. I won't get into that, but it's basically 4 ministerial appointed, including the Chair, and 3 elected. Above them there will be a board of chairs, which will comprise the chair of each of the 11 local land service organisations, plus 1 independent chair that will also be appointed by the Minister. So the idea of this is that the chairs of the local boards really have the major control of the total organisation, and that's seen as a mechanism to try and make sure it doesn't become centralist, that the 11 out of 12 directors will be people who've got a vested interest in devolving responsibility and keeping accountability within their own region. So that's the broad structure. And the Board of Chairs' overall role, it's one statutory organisation, so they'll have the responsibility to deal with policy issues that cover more than one, giving advice to the Minister on issues that cover more than one local land service area. But the principle is very strong that if that can be dealt with within the local area or dealt with by collaboration among adjoining local land service areas, then that's the process to follow, not refer it up and then get a decision and feed it back down. Now, the way these bodies will be basically administered is that each local land service area will have to produce, or each local land service board will have to produce a strategic plan that will set out their objectives in an RM sense, biosecurity sense and so forth, and then they'll have to produce an annual report. That plan will be public, have to be signed off by the Minister. That each year they will then have to produce an annual report that sets out how much money they spent, what they spent it on, and what's been achieved working against the objectives set out in their plan. And then there'll be an independent audit process applied to those bodies on a performance audit basis, which those audits will also be public, and that system's been modelled on the way it's been done in catchment management authorities in New South Wales, where an independent body, which in New South Wales and CMAs is the Resources Commission, they go and do performance audits at regular intervals, and those become public documents as well, so there's a good feedback to the community about what these boards are doing and how they're performing against their objectives. There's no commitment to be the Natural Resources Commission going forward, but the commitment is there will be an audit, and it'll be done by one body, and it'll be a performance audit in addition to the financial audits done by the Auditor General. So all of that process has been designed to try and make sure there's good accountability, it's open and transparent, and by having 11 operating on a similar system, then we should be able to see which local land services are performing well and which ones need a bit of a kick along. Now, the next major issue was boundaries, and this was an issue, as I said earlier, because of LHPAs coming from a land use perspective and catchment management authorities coming basically from a catchment perspective. Then there was a lot of debate went on in the reference panel and elsewhere about what the boundaries for these bodies should be. And the particular areas of contention were in the middle area, it's called Central Tablelands, a purple blob there, if you know where Bathurst and Orange is, and Lithgow, that's about where it is. And there was a view that we didn't need that area, and there was another very strong view that we didn't need a local land, that we did need a local land service area there. And we ended up with one, which meant we ended up with 11. The other areas of contention were basically the Western Division and whether some of the Western Division should be carved off into surrounding ones or just leave Western Division as a huge blob. The final decision was we'd leave it largely intact except for the western part of Walgett Shire, which has been put into that light green one at the top. So Walgett Shire has been left whole by transferring what's known as Finch County out of Western Division into the northwest. So by and large, this map, well, that's now cast in stone, and we've got 4 LLS regions down the coast. So there's North, the Hunter, Sydney, and then the South Coast. Then you see there's a blue area of New England or Northern Tablelands. There's the Central Tablelands, which is the purple area I referred to, and the Southern Tablelands have been combined in with the South Coast because this area down here has got a huge area of national park and state forest, none of which pay rates. So to get a reasonable ratepayer base down in this part of the state, we needed to put the tablelands in with the coastal areas. And then you see going further west, we've got the northwest, which is basically Border Rivers, Gwydir River and the Namoy. And then we've got the next one, which is predominantly the Macquarie River and the Central West, Macquarie River and a lot of the Lachlan. Then there's the Riverina, which is predominantly based around Murrumbidgee. The bottom green one's the Murray, and then, as I said, we've got the Western Division. I should say, even though these have been set up with 7 directors, Western Division's got 9, recognising that just getting around a huge area that's more than a third of the state will require more directors than the smaller areas. So that's the boundaries, and then get on to a bit of a potted version of the financials for these bodies. So what I've got on this slide is the amount of money that's currently estimated to go into these local land services for the next 4 years, so 2014-15 up to 2017-18. And you'll see there the total amount in aggregate over the 4 years is just over 500 million. These are estimates. Some of them are budget forecasts and some are best guesses. The LHPA rates will be about 140 million. That's about 35 million per annum. And then there's New South Wales Government recurrent funding, which funds basically the baseline positions in a recurrent sense for what the people who've come from CMAs. That's about 100 million, 25 million a year. And then there's 2 lots of grant funding that come in traditionally through CMAs but will now go into local land services. There's something called New South Wales Catchment Action Funding, and which is spent on grants mostly with NRM outcomes. And similarly, there's Commonwealth funding of about 130 million that comes from the Commonwealth on a competitive basis, currently to CMAs, but will come to local land services in future. And then to recognise that the extension activities that have been transferred from DPI to local land services, then DPI will put in about 5 million per annum towards the cost of providing those extension services. So that's basically the outline. If you say farmers' rates are the 140 out of the 500, then it's a quarter to a third is coming from farmers and the balance will be from state and federal government. So where do we go from here? Then this is the timeline that's proposed to get us through to January 2014. We've got the legislations passed Parliament by the end of May. The positions for the chair of chairs of this chairs board and the chairs of the individual local land services, they've been advertised and the applications closed yesterday. There'll be interviews conducted very quickly in the next couple of weeks, and the intention is that the chairs and the chair of chairs will be appointed by the Minister by the end of July. The next step then will be to find other directors to go on these boards as an interim board, and there'll be another 3 directors appointed by the Minister to get her quota of 4. They'll be appointed by the end of September, so we'll have interim boards in place by end of September. Those boards will then have to go and recruit general managers, sort out staff structures, office arrangements and so on that will apply from the end of, or from the start of January. And then we'll start the process with these interim boards, and then in the first quarter it will be the first lot of elections for the elected directors to these boards. So that's a broad rundown of where it's all at. I think my personal view is this is a really it's a challenging process to go through, because there'll be a lot of culture change to be implemented both before January and after January. But if we can pull it off, and I'm sure we can, then this will establish New South Wales, I think, among all of the agricultural service delivery organisations in Australia as a clear leader. We've had a very good reputation in relation to CMAs and DPI extension activities, and our LHPA system is unique. No other state has that same system, but by bringing it all together into general triple bottom line outcome, then I think we're sitting on a really good opportunity for efficient and rewarding service delivery to landholders.